Have you ever found yourself in such a predicament in your life or work? Facing complex investment decisions, you have analyzed the data but still made a wrong judgment? Seeing others make quick profits by following the trend, only to end up in total failure when you follow suit? Have you read countless books on success, but still hesitate when it comes to making crucial choices? If the answer is yes, then Charlie Munger's wisdom might just be the key you need to break the deadlock. This poor Charlie's Almanack, which compiles the essence of Munger's life's thoughts, has never been an ordinary investment guide. Rather, it is more like a universal wisdom operating system. Munger has proved through his practice spanning more than half a century that ordinary people do not need to rely on talent or luck. As long as they master a set of rigorous thinking methods, they can make correct decisions continuously in business, investment, and even life. The reason why his wisdom is precious lies precisely in its penetrating power against common sense. When people chase after popular opportunities, he emphasizes acting only within one's own circle of competence and using a multi-thinking model to see through the essence of things. While most people are struggling with how to succeed, he uses reverse thinking to remind them, "I just want to know where I will die in the future, so I won't go there." When the industry adheres to professional segmentation, he promotes interdisciplinary knowledge, believing that those holding a hammer see everything as a nail, which is a fatal limitation of thinking. In this era of information explosion and accelerated change, Munger's wisdom not only helps us avoid foolish mistakes, but also enables us to find unchanging principles amid the complexity. As he said, most success in life and business comes from knowing what to avoid. Whether it is to enhance investment judgment, optimize decision-making logic, or simply to live a good life, Munger's thoughts are like a mirror, reflecting the blind spots in our thinking and guiding the path to rationality and composure. Munger's wisdom is like a universal wisdom operating system, and to understand the source code of this system, one has to start from his life trajectory. This man, who was called the most perfect partner by Buffett, was not a born investment master. His growth path was filled with unconventional choices, and these choices precisely confirmed the multidimensional thinking and reverse thinking that he later advocated. Just as he himself said, to understand something, one must first know its ins and outs. First of all, let's start with his unconventional legal career. Charlie Munger's story began in Omaha, Nebraska. This small town, where Buffett was born, also planted his initial understanding of business. When he was a teenager, he worked at Buffett's grandfather's grocery store for 12 hours a day. He had to move goods and also deal with the boss's strict anti-socialist rules, such as having to pay 2 cents as Social Security fees after work. This experience made him realize the weight of discipline and reality at an early age, and also enabled him to always remain sensitive to cash flow and cost control in his later investments. During his college years, Munger's talent for interdisciplinary studies began to show. He first studied mathematics and physics, then learned meteorology due to his service in World War II, and eventually graduated from Harvard Law School as an outstanding graduate. This interdisciplinary learning path laid the groundwork for the formation of his later multidimensional thinking model. After entering the legal profession, he did not confine himself to the traditional hourly charging model. Instead, he quietly accumulated experience in business operation and investment by handling commercial affairs for clients. He once invested in a client's electrical appliance enterprise and even developed real estate in partnership with others. In just a few years, he made $1.4 million through real estate projects. When he founded the law firm Munger, Tolles, Olson in Los Angeles, his eccentric traits became even more pronounced. He asked the lawyer to do a good job with what was at hand, and naturally, some clients would reject the exaggerated marketing. He also voluntarily gave his shares to the young partner who was suffering from cancer, simply because the other party needed more support. This style of prioritizing personal development over profit stood in sharp contrast to the greed of Wall Street at that time and laid the foundation for his later investment philosophy, which he believed was that honesty was the best strategy. A dinner party in 1959 became a crucial turning point in Munger's life. At that time, 29-year-old Buffett met 35-year-old Munger. The two talked from business to history, from finance to human nature, and found that their understanding of value investment was astonishingly compatible. Buffett later recalled the joke Charlie told him that night and laughed so hard that he leaned forward and backward. "I knew I had met someone of the same kind." This friendship completely changed the investment trajectories of the two. In his early days, influenced by his mentor Graham, Buffett focused on seeking out low-priced cigarette but stocks. That is, the stocks of companies whose prices were far below their net asset values. However, Munger advised him that buying good companies was more important than buying cheap ones. It was precisely this suggestion that led Berkshire to shift from picking up cigarette butts to investing in great enterprises with moats such as Coca-Cola and Gillette, achieving an upgrade in its investment philosophy. Munger's influence on Buffett goes far beyond investment strategies. His multifaceted thinking enabled Buffett to break away from the single framework of financial analysis. For instance, when investing in BYD, Munger persuaded Buffett to heavily invest in this Chinese company that was not highly regarded at that time merely by judging Wang Chuanfu's technological obsession and strategic vision. Buffett frankly admitted, "Charlie has expanded my business. He is the smartest person I have ever met." Apart from his roles as an investor and a lawyer, Munger's diversity is reflected in all aspects of his life. He is an avid reader. He says that all the smart people he has met in his life have read every day, from physics papers to Cicero's on old age, from Darwin's biography to economic works. His knowledge reserves span more than 10 disciplines, and he is teased by his children as a book with 2 legs. He is also a self-taught architect. From his own residence to the dormitory building of Stanford University and the Munger Research Center of Huntington Library, he personally designed the drawings and even participated in the construction details. This ability to control details and systems also extends to his investments. He will disassemble the business model and competitive advantages of enterprises as he examines the structure of buildings. In the field of charity, he also maintained a pragmatic style, donating $60 million to Stanford University, but demanding that the buildings be both durable and aesthetically pleasing. When donating to build a research center for the Huntington Library, I personally reviewed the budget to ensure that every penny was spent where it was most needed. He said, Franklin used his wealth for charity. I'm just following his example. This pursuit of role models is precisely the embodiment of his lifelong learning philosophy. From a lawyer to an investment master, from a cross-disciplinary learner to a philanthropist, Munger's life itself is a practice of multifaceted thinking. Each of his choices coincided with the principles he later proposed, breaking through limitations with interdisciplinary knowledge, avoiding risks through reverse thinking, and accumulating compound interest with honesty and patience. And this is precisely the starting point for us to understand his wisdom. Just as Franklin, whom he admired, said, "The things that bring the greatest happiness are virtue, health, talent, and temperament." Munger spent his entire life proving that these qualities and wisdom are far more important than wealth itself. Charlie Munger's life path itself is an interdisciplinary practice, from mathematics and physics to law, from real estate to investment. He has never been bound by the boundaries of a single field. This experience made him deeply realize that the problems in the real world can never be solved by a single discipline. Just as when he designs buildings, he has to take into account both structural mechanics and aesthetics as well as practicality, and solve the problems of life and investment. This requires a set of multidimensional thinking toolboxes. In his book, Munger repeatedly warns of a thinking misconception. To the person holding a hammer, the world seems like a nail. This hammerman tendency refers to the fact that once people master the knowledge of a certain field, they will habitually use this tool to solve all problems, eventually leading to distorted judgment. Economists mechanically apply complex mathematical models to the real economy, yet they overlook the influence of psychology on human decision-making. Biologists cannot fully explain natural selection if they ignore geographical and climatic factors when studying species evolution. Many business managers judge a company's value merely based on financial statements, but ignore industry trends. For instance, Nokia ignored the smartphone wave. Investors only measure stocks by the price-earnings ratio, but fail to see the brand moat and management flaws, and eventually become victims of market fluctuations. Mang used his own experience to prove that when he eventually became a lawyer, he found that many of his colleagues, due to their lack of understanding of business logic, could have fought for greater benefits for their clients, but were only confined to legal provisions. And by studying accounting and tax knowledge, he could always come up with more comprehensive solutions, which was precisely the early practice of interdisciplinary thinking. Munger emphasized that true simple wisdom does not require mastering all disciplines, such as grasping the key theories of important disciplines, or compiling them into a thinking dimension, like the core disciplines and key models in the eyes. It includes the principle of compound interest in mathematics, the world's 8th logical explanation, the power of long-term investment, the theory of analyzing decisions based on power, the core of mathematical thinking, and essential tools for risk and return. Critical mass in physics. For instance, when an enterprise reaches a certain scale, its advantages will self-reinforce. If it is about the cash reserves of risk assessment, such as black swan events, the natural forces in biology, the procedures of winners in business competition, like Amazon's inheritance, the basic ecosystem of traditional retail, the symbiotic relationship between enterprises and their upstream and downstream, like Apple's collaboration with the supply chain, and the 15 types of human misjudgment psychology in psychology, such as loss aversion, causing people to sell good stocks too early. Confirmation bias leads people to overlook counter-evidence, such as the most practical but most neglected knowledge in Neo-Confucianism. There is also the scale theory in economics. For instance, Costco reduces costs through bulk purchasing. Marginal effects, such as the critical point of enterprise expansion. The core value of these models lies in their synergy. Just as Munger analyzed Coca-Cola, he borrowed brand psychology to explain consumer loyalty, used economies of scale to illustrate its low price advantage, and also used cultural semiotics to see it become a representative of the American spirit. Only by superimposing multiple dimensions can one penetrate the surface and see the essential value of an enterprise. Munger's wisdom lies not only in how to do the right things, but also in how to avoid doing the wrong ones, and interdisciplinary thinking is precisely the key to avoiding mistakes. For instance, while most people are fixated on short-term stock price fluctuations due to the anchoring effect, Munger uses history to remind himself that market madness will eventually pass, and psychology to be vigilant against group irrationality, ultimately seizing the opportunity after the sharp decline. He drew on the redundant design of engineering to maintain a cash reserve in life and avoid financial crises. Viewing personal growth from the perspective of evolutionary thinking in biology, it is believed that lifelong learning is the best way to adapt to the world. This eagerness for interdisciplinary knowledge led to the continuous iteration of his thinking model, eventually forming an operating system for dealing with the complex world. Munger's multi-thinking model emphasizes penetrating the essence from an interdisciplinary perspective, a concept that is particularly profound in his investment philosophy. His and Buffett's investment strategies did not focus on great enterprises from the very beginning. Instead, they evolved from picking up cigarette butts in Graham's market to purchasing quality assets at reasonable prices. Behind this transformation lies the breakthrough of multiple thinking over a single investment framework. Why did Mang say that cheap goods are not necessarily good ones? Benjamin Graham, the founder of value investing, advocated seeking stocks whose prices are far below their net worth, just like picking up a discarded company on the roadside. Even if there is only a wisp of tobacco left, one can still have a free puff. In his early years, Buffett was deeply influenced by this concept, and Blind Man initially also recognized this margin of safety thinking. However, as the practice deepened, Munger discovered that this strategy had fatal flaws. The first one was the high time cost during the holding period. Cigarette butt stocks often have poor fundamentals. Enterprises need to spend a lot of energy judging their liquidation value, and holding them for a long time may erode profits due to the continuous losses of the enterprises. Secondly, it is easy to miss out on companies with growth value. If one only focuses on price without considering quality, they will miss out on those high-quality enterprises with moats. For instance, Munger once quipped that if we only bought cheap goods, we wouldn't have invested in Coca-Cola at all. But it has never been the cheapest, yet its brand value can continuously generate profits. Then came the warning from multiple thinking to him. From a psychological perspective, examiners are prone to fall into the reverse trap of loss aversion, overly focusing on low prices while neglecting the essence of poor performance of enterprises. From a biological perspective, this is like choosing endangered species over those with strong adaptability, which goes against the logic of natural selection. Munger pushed Buffett to break out of the framework of testing, and the core lies in his redefinition of investment value with interdisciplinary thinking. In his view, a great enterprise must meet 3 core criteria, each of which integrates a multidisciplinary perspective. The first is the mode, which uses economics and sociology to judge irreplaceability. In Mang's view, the mode is a competitive advantage formed by enterprises through brand, technology, scale, etc., just like an ecological niche in biology, which is difficult for other enterprises to invade. For instance, Shisher Candy has established a unique position in the chocolate market by virtue of its high quality and brand loyalty. Even if it raises prices, it will not affect its sales. Munger once recalled that when we were acquiring Shisher, we almost gave up because of a $10,000 price difference. Fortunately, we followed our friend's advice that quality assets were worth bargaining over. The second is that the management assesses reliability with psychology and ethics. He emphasized that buying stocks means purchasing ownership of a company, and the competence, reliability, and shareholder consideration of the management are more important than financial data. From a psychological perspective, honest management can reduce agency costs, such as avoiding excessive expansion and rationally distributing profits. From an ethical perspective, managers who prioritize shareholders' interests are more likely to resist temptation in the long run. The third is long-termism, using mathematics and history to verify the compound interest effect. Munger advocates holding great enterprises for the long term. Essentially, he believes in the power of compound interest, just like the formula of compound interest in mathematics. The profits of high-quality enterprises will grow exponentially over time. He took Coca-Cola as an example. In the long term, the growth brought by brand influence and the global distribution network far exceeds the impact of short-term price fluctuations. From a historical perspective, however, it reminds him that enterprises that have survived economic cycles wars, and technological changes often possess greater resilience. Munger's investment logic has never deviated from the foundation of multifaceted thinking. The three major principles he summarized still hold guiding significance to this day. The first principle is to stick to one circle of competence and filter opportunities with cognitive boundaries. He repeatedly emphasized that he should only invest in areas he can understand. This stems from his vigilance against the tendency of the hammerman. If one does not understand the technical logic of technology stocks, they will not blindly follow the trend due to the market's hype. Just as he said, if you do have the ability, you will be clear about your boundaries. If asked whether it is beyond one circle of competence, the answer is often yes. The second principle is to wait in the strike zone and restrain impulses with probabilistic thinking. Drawing on baseball player Ted Williams' theory of the 7-grid batting area, Munger believes that investment should be made by waiting for the best batting position. Only when the enterprise value is much higher than the price and the probability of winning is extremely high should one make a move. He once said that the key to our success is to make fewer decisions, but to bet heavily on each one. The third principle is to reject false security and use reverse thinking to identify risks. He will first assume that the investment will fail and then use models from various disciplines to identify risks. Expose financial fraud with accounting, predict management motives with psychology, and analyze industry changes with critical points in physics. For instance, in his early years, he avoided the dot-com bubble by using psychology to see through the collective frenzy and economics to judge that most enterprises lacked real profits. From testing places to buying great enterprises, the essence of Munger's investment logic evolution is the transcendence of multiple thinking over a single valuation framework. He does not deny the value of the margin of safety, but he places more emphasis on judging the long-term vitality of an enterprise from an interdisciplinary perspective, which is precisely his greatest contribution to value investment. Investment is not merely about accounting. It is a comprehensive insight into the essence of enterprises, the laws of human nature, and social trends. Munger's investment logic has always been rooted in multifaceted thinking, and this way of thinking has also shaped his philosophy of life. He doesn't pursue fancy theories, but deals with the complexity of life with the most simple principles. These principles may seem simple, but they are highly penetrating because they integrate the wisdom of multiple disciplines. Just as he said in the book, much of life's success comes from knowing what to avoid. Munger's multifaceted thinking is not innate, but stems from an extreme thirst for knowledge. He once admitted that he had never systematically studied chemistry, economics, or psychology in class, but through decades of self-study, the core principles of these subjects were internalized as his thinking tools. His reading list includes biographies, learning ways of thinking from Franklin and Darwin, scientific works, using the critical mass in physics to understand the laws of development of things. Psychology dissects the root causes of human misjudgment. He believes that making friends with deceased great men can enable one to stand on the shoulders of giants and avoid detours. He opposes learning knowledge for the sake of obtaining it and emphasizes that knowledge must be used to deal with reality. For instance, when he read Cicero's On Old Age, it was not only to understand ancient Roman philosophy, but also to learn how to face aging gracefully. This pragmatic learning attitude has enabled his knowledge system to always serve life and investment. Every morning when he gets up, he strives to be a little smarter than yesterday. This is his motto. He views self-improvement from the perspective of biological evolution, believing that continuous learning is a way of thinking that adapts to the changes in the world, just like the law of survival of the fittest in natural selection. Only by constantly iterating one's cognition can one avoid being eliminated. Munger's life strategy was deeply influenced by reverse thinking, a way of thinking originated from mathematics and physics, which he applied to all aspects of his life. He believes that instead of getting bogged down in how to succeed, it's better to first figure out how to fail and then resolutely avoid it. He put forward the thinking of avoiding pain. One is not to change one's mood with chemical substances, that is, to be vigilant against addiction. Second, one should not be jealous. Such emotions only consume oneself and offer no benefit at all. Thirdly, don't hold grudges. Life is already hard. Why stuff it with the bitterness of resentment? Fourth, do not be fickle. Only by doing what you are doing sincerely can you accumulate the compound interest effect. Munger advocates learning from mistakes. He collects failure cases from all walks of life and compiles them into negative lists. For instance, when he studied the reasons for business bankruptcies, he found that arrogance, laziness, and greed were the three main causes, and thus deliberately avoided them in his own decisions. This kind of thinking of learning from history essentially uses the perspective of history to avoid repeating the same mistakes. He also believes that honesty is the best strategy. In his view, moral character is inseparable from long-term success. This view stems not only from the admiration for sages like Franklin, but also from his profound insight into human nature. From a psychological perspective, honest people are more likely to gain the trust of others, thereby accumulating intangible social capital. Munger often prefers to suffer losses rather than gain advantages. When he was engaged in real estate investment in his early years, he once voluntarily redeemed the bonds of his partners at face value. Even if the other party does not ask to do business in partnership with a friend, he will offer benefits to those who need them more. He believes that short-term concessions and interests will be rewarded with long-term trust. He also adheres to principles and refuses to explore gray areas. He refused to get involved in anything that seemed compliant on the surface but was essentially unfair, such as manipulating stock prices and financial fraud. He said that some things, even if they are legal, are not worth doing. You have to have your own bottom line. This perseverance kept him clear-headed amid the chaos on Wall Street. Besides, Munger is tolerant and respectful towards others. Despite his straightforward personality, Munger is extremely patient with those who truly work hard. He will spend hours guiding young entrepreneurs and also cover up for the mistakes of his subordinates, provided that they honestly admit their mistakes and correct them. He believes that respecting others is respecting oneself, which is a simple application of the principle of reciprocity in sociology. Munger's lifestyle is as simple as his way of thinking. He often says, "Don't let complexity drown out the essence." He has always lived in an ordinary house he bought decades ago, often traveling in economy class and refusing unnecessary material pursuits. This minimalism is not stingy. Rather, it is aimed at reducing distractions and focusing. What truly matters is that although material things are minimalist, the spirit is rich. He believes that excessive material demands can become a burden, just like the extra weight in physics, which can reduce efficiency. Rather than spending time chasing after wealth, it is better to use this time to read, think, or be with family. Drawing on the marginal effect in economics, he focused his energy on things that could bring the greatest returns, such as discussing investment with Buffett and designing efficient operation models for charitable organizations. He said, "There have been no more than a dozen truly important decisions in my life." Mang's philosophy of life is essentially the application of multifaceted thinking in daily life. It uses biology to understand growth, psychology to avoid human weaknesses, history to draw experience, and ethics to anchor the moral bottom line. These simple wisdoms, without flowery words, can generate tremendous power in the long term, just like the compound interest effect he advocates. Just as he quoted Franklin's famous saying in the book, "A sack cannot stand up a person's way of thinking in life." These things are jointly supported by his cognition, character, and actions, and this is precisely the most precious enlightenment that Munger has left us. We have sorted out Munger's multi-thinking model, investment logic, and philosophy of life. This wisdom is not theoretical knowledge confined to books, but rather practical guidelines that he has verified throughout his life. As Munger said, having an idea alone is not enough. You must put it into practice. They internalized his wisdom into their own abilities, which required deliberate reflection and continuous action. This precisely echoes his core principles of lifelong learning and reverse thinking. Munger repeatedly emphasizes the importance of not deceiving oneself in his book. However, many people only understand his wisdom at the stage of knowing it. They can restate the multi-thinking model, but when making decisions, they only understand the value of reverse thinking from a single perspective, yet still repeat past mistakes. The root cause of this disconnection lies in the neglect of the Hammerman tendency that Munger repeatedly reminded of. We always habitually act in the way we are familiar with, even if it is wrong. There are many common misunderstandings, such as equating reading with mastery, thinking that after finishing a book, one has understood it. However, Munger never analyzed a problem with his own thinking. For instance, to avoid uncomfortable thoughts, multidisciplinary thinking requires cross-border integration of knowledge, which demands extra effort. Many people give up because they find it troublesome and retreat to the comfort zone of single-minded thinking. For instance, ignoring minor mistakes. Munger said, "If small mistakes are not corrected, big ones will come knocking." However, most people turn a blind eye to their own thinking biases. For instance, they sell quality stocks too early due to loss aversion and attribute it to bad luck. Munger advocates checklists, which stem from the safety mechanisms of the aviation industry. This tool is also applicable to internalizing his wisdom. You can create two lists and regularly compare and reflect on them. The first one is the list of thinking biases, listing the 25 types of human misjudgment psychology mentioned by Munger, such as confirming the bias anchoring effect. Record every day whether you have fallen into it. For example, whether you bought a popular product today due to herd mentality, and whether you ignored negative evidence when making decisions. The second one is the list of principles to be practiced. By referring to Munger's core principles, check whether your actions are consistent and whether you have adhered to your circle of competence, such as whether you have invested in areas you have no idea about at all, whether you have patiently waited for the good ball zone, whether you have made forced decisions due to eagerness to act, and whether you have made a little progress every day and learned a new knowledge point in a certain field today. The essence of this checklist method is to use external tools to counter human laziness. As Munger said, even experienced pilots will not skip checklists. Munger's wisdom is like compound interest, which requires the accumulation of effects through continuous small actions. Here are 3 exercises that can be put into practice immediately. Exercise 1, once a week, uses a multivariate model to analyze a daily problem and selects a familiar object, such as a restaurant or an app. Try to analyze its success or failure from at least 3 different disciplinary perspectives. For instance, when analyzing Starbucks, apply the third mindset of psychology to meet social needs. Economics, large-scale procurement reduces costs. Sociological brands have become symbols of urban life. This kind of exercise can help you break through a single way of thinking and gradually develop the habit of cross-border association. Exercise 2. Once a month, conduct reverse thinking, review one failed event, and recall a recent mistake, such as an investment loss or a decision-making error. Use Munger's approach to avoiding failure to inquire about the cause of the failure, for instance, whether it was due to overconfidence that risks were overlooked. These principles can prevent similar mistakes, such as adhering to one's circle of competence and attaching importance to negative evidence. Munger said that learning from failure is more effective than learning from success. This kind of review can help you turn mistakes into practical experience. 3. Persist in establishing blind format reading lists for a long time. Munger's wisdom stems from extensive reading. You can imitate the structure of his reading list, such as biographies like Franklin's autobiography and Einstein's biography, and draw inspiration from the way of thinking of great men. Science and psychology fields, such as thinking fast and slow and the origin of species, lay a solid foundation for multifaceted thinking. Business and investment categories, such as Smart Investors and Buffett's letter to shareholders, combine practice to understand theory. The key is to read with questions in mind. For instance, when reading psychology, deliberately seek out theories that can explain the biases in your decisions. Munger never demands perfection in one go. He himself admits that he has made many mistakes in his life, and internalizing his wisdom requires acceptance. Progress is gradual. Allow yourself to slow down a bit. There's no need to rush to master all the thinking models. First, thoroughly understand the most core ones, such as compound force, reverse thinking, and misjudgment. Psychology regards error correction as the norm. Just like Munger, destroying one's favorite ideas and regularly reviewing and correcting one's thinking is not self-denial but evolution. Looking at change from a long-term perspective, just as the compound interest effect requires time, the transformation of thinking also needs accumulation. If you persist in deliberate practice for a year, you will find that your perspective on problems has completely changed. Munger's wisdom is not the standard answer, but a tool to help us find our own answers. He proved throughout his life that ordinary people do not need to be exceptionally talented. They only need to think in multiple ways, avoid things in reverse, and practice throughout their lives to live a clear and composed life in a complex world. Just as he quoted in the book, "My sword is for those who can wield it." May you and I both take up this sword of wisdom and, in our own lives, avoid traps while also seizing our own good ball zone.